So let's get back to our calls now on this question of whether Just Stop Oil crossed a line, as David thinks, when they interrupted George Osborne's wedding. We can speak now to James Skeet, who is a representative from Just Stop Oil, a spokesperson for them. Good morning, James.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. So are you feeling the heat this morning? Do you think you crossed the line?
Well, I think this story is sort of somewhat emblematic of the general failures of our media, to be honest. While you are there stoking outrage, I'll just remind you that an area the size of Portugal has burnt down in Canada, and you seem to be getting your knickers in a twist about orange confetti being thrown at a wedding, when this is a man who's responsible. His legacy is the sustained economic collapse in this country.
Okay,
He's responsible for thousands of excess deaths.
Yeah, but it's his wedding day, James. It's his wedding day. It's his wedding day.
But no.
He's not there to make a political point. He's there to get married to his wife, and his kids are there. It's very personal.
I will come to that, actually, because, as I said, it's emblematic of the failures of the British media that you haven't done your research that actually Just Stop Oil did not disrupt George Osborne's wedding.
Well, they did, because there's a video of them throwing orange confetti over him.
Yes, there's a video. No, there's a video of a woman throwing orange confetti at a wedding.
Yes, on private church property where she wasn't invited to be there.
Yeah, but this is not. She's not one of ours, I'm afraid.
So she doesn't represent Just Stop Oil.
She doesn't represent Just Stop Oil.
So why did you tweet the video? Why did Just Stop Oil tweet the video last night then of it?
Well, we retweeted.
You tweeted the video and you claimed the video as yours.
No, we didn't. It belongs to PA. If you eagle-eyed.
You look good in orange, George Osborne. Congratulations to the new. No, James. This is what you tweeted yesterday on Just Stop Oil's official Twitter page. You look good in orange at George Osborne. Congratulations to the newlyweds. No further context whatsoever, but a video of orange confetti being thrown over George Osborne and Thea Rogers. That will suggest to most people that this was an event that was organised by Just Stop Oil that you fully sanction.
Well, you failed to sort of confirm that with us, didn't you? Actually, what we've done there is wish them well. I'll just remind you, actually, that the Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London said that George Osborne's policies delayed the economic recovery of this country, right? He is the reason that we are living in the sort of smouldering cesspit that we find ourselves in, right?
So if
concerned about him, you are concerned about orange confetti being thrown at him. I'll just remind you that we've just had the hottest June on record. We broke the average temperature on this planet. The record was broken not once this week, but twice.
Yeah, you don't need to remind me of that, James. You don't need to remind me of that because we've covered it extensively on ITV News this week and LBC News this week.
But
the reason we're talking about it is because you've crossed a line, and you're saying it's not Just Stop Oil, but do you condone getting involved in someone's wedding to throw orange confetti over them to make a political point?
I neither condone nor I have no opinion on it.
Well, then you do condone it. You do condone it. If you're not saying you condemn it, then you condone it.
Oh, come on.
You either condone it or you don't. Is it okay? Is it okay? Tell me if it's okay.
I have no problems with confetti being thrown at a wedding. What I do have
by
problems
a political protester who isn't invited
with,
to the wedding. Is that okay?
What I do have problems with is 250,000 Somalis being evacuated from their homes. What I do have problems with
I have a problem with that too. I have a problem with that too, James.
33 million people being displaced in Pakistan. And what I have a problem with
I have a problem with that too. And we report... Well, all right, you can beat us with that stick as much as you want, but we reported from Pakistan. We sent reporters to those floods, and they were fantastic reports that really got to the impact that was going on there of climate change.
Why don't you look at the economic legacy of someone like George Osborne, the fact that he's responsible for thousands of excess deaths, the collapse of the NHS, thousands of food banks, the sustained pinch that all of your listeners are experiencing are directly attributable to this man, and you're concerned about orange confetti being thrown at his wedding.
I'm able to be concerned about more than one thing at once.
In order.
Well, okay,
your priorities are out of order.
All right, well, we discussed public sector pay for the first hour of this show. The first and foremost topic of the show today was about public sector pay and people struggling to not be able to afford their bills. I'm also able to ask a third question on my show.
Or were you more concerned concerned about orange confetti.
We discussed it in the context of the Conservative government and whether they should increase people's wages and whether they're failing to manage the economy. Yes, and that Conservative government has been in power for 13 years, and you can trace some of those policies back to George Osborne and have a debate about all of that. But it's also perfectly possible to ask another question at the same time in a 3-hour show, which is it okay to throw orange confetti over someone on their private wedding day? You can't answer that question. You can't answer that question.
We're in
you can't answer it. Answer the question, James.
This is the question on a Sunday morning on LBC. Is it all right to throw confetti at someone's wedding? And you're so paranoid that it's down to Just Stop Oil that, that you immediately jump to assuming that it does.
Do you condone it?
I have no thoughts on it whatsoever, to be honest. I have very little positive feeling towards George Osborne, as you might imagine. But what I would call on the media to do is to get your priorities in order and focus on the big issues that actually affect your listeners. Millions of people are dying. We are on course to civilizational collapse. The Secretary General of the United Nations this week said that the climate crisis is out of control. Why are you not telling your listeners that? Why are you not having an hour's bone-in on that and what that actually means for your listeners? For God's sake, get your head out of your arse.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to leave the call there with James because we had to just clip a little bit out of it because he actually used a rather rude term at the end of it. And actually, I think, I take James's point that what he wants to discuss is climate change and that the media should be discussing climate change. And I fully respect that people feel frustrated that maybe there isn't enough discussion about that. Although I would counter that we did discuss, didn't we, if you've been listening this morning, for example, America and China having diplomatic relations this week to discuss about how they're going to bang their heads together to deal with the global climate issue. And as I said, we did also discuss the way the Conservative government is handling the economy. So it's not fair to say that nobody is sort of tracing any of these problems with the economy back to potentially Conservative policies. But it is also, I think, perfectly reasonable to ask the question of when you're trying to raise the issue of climate change, whether it is ethical to invade someone's wedding and throw confetti. Now, interestingly, James says that wasn't Just Stop Oil, but they were very happy to grab that video and put it on their Twitter last night. And I think that was quite suggestive to sort of say it was us. But he says this morning, I'm wrong, it wasn't them, and that isn't what they were trying to do. What do you think? Have Just Stop Oil crossed the line by throwing confetti over George Osborne at his wedding? Do you think weddings are one place where political protest should not be welcome? You can call me. Let's talk to Tracy, who's in Milton Keynes. Good morning, Tracy.
Hello, thank you for having me on. I was part of the Insulate Britain campaign, but I haven't been on the road with Just Stop Oil, and I couldn't have done what they did yesterday because, to be honest, I'd have slapped him, not thrown confetti on him. He killed people and he's evading responsibility. And what Just Stop Oil are doing is desperately, with every non-violent means, pleading for us all to take a bit of responsibility here.
Yeah. So
I can't believe.
Sorry, Tracy. Sorry, just to pick you up on your point there, you said about George Osborne being responsible for the deaths of people. Are you saying through austerity, through his policies?
Yeah, the lowball figures for that are it cost 330,000 lives. And as a disabled British person, I'm terrified of what's coming out of the current narrative. And I just really want to make the point, maybe a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I honestly don't know if I'd have gone there. I wouldn't have slapped him because that's just a bit of confetti, right? And
we can't condone physical. We can't condone that physical violence. So come on, Tracy.
Exactly.
It's never okay to hit anyone, let alone a politician you disagree with.
Never go on the road. That's why I haven't been on the road with Just Stop Oil, because non-violence. I don't want a revolt in revolt. And 2 years on, darling, you're still talking about what we're doing and not the why. We are all collectively responsible for this. We need to stop these silly popularity contests with MPs trying to decide what we want to hear. Leadership is telling the tough truth, and we all have to understand the basic science here. Climate is not weather. Food shortages are coming. How do we want to deal with that? Do we want the likes of Suella Braverman sending our police to supermarkets to police starving mums with machine guns, or do we want to talk about this and plan? Because, it's Johnny Bairstow. It was obvious and the F1, people are worried, other people are going to go on the track. So you plan, you prepare. But we are failing to do that on a global scale.
Okay.
When the question is, are our children going to have enough food and water to drink? Because they know water short, coming in shortages. And what have they done? They put it on the bloody stock market.
Okay. Tracy, thanks so much for your call this morning. Tracy obviously feeling very passionately about all of this. Let's talk to Matthew, who's in Harlow. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. So I think you agree that we need to take action on climate change, but you don't necessarily agree with the tactics of Just Stop Oil.
Yeah, I just think, no matter what people might think of Mr. Osborne, I just think, you need to put yourself in his shoes. How would you feel if that was you? How would you feel if that was your daughter, your son? Do you know what I mean? I'm in education. I'm a head teacher, and if you think back to, I'm not going to show my age here, but if you think back to maybe when we were in school, some of these things are already being talked about in textbooks and things like that. So it's not a new concept. It's not a new problem the world is facing. It's almost like we're playing catch up now, like we knew about these problems years ago, decades ago. It's only now when the temperatures suddenly, etc., that people are now thinking, okay, now we've got to do something. And I don't want to say it's too late, because I don't think it is, but there's a way to educate the people on this. And if you think about, from my perspective, in education, what are we teaching our children in regard to how we protest? I think that's sending the wrong message. If Just Stop Oil are that passionate about their campaign, why don't you go into schools and teach the children and talk to the children, instead of teach the children it's okay to throw things at people, it's okay to climb up a bridge, which is very dangerous, obviously.
I suppose what they'd argue is that lots of these other tactics have been tried and tested before, and unless they do something really radically different, we're not going to spur action on climate change. They're desperately hoping to break through into the public conversation.
I understand. I just worry about we're teaching the wrong message to the next generation, and I just think that's why I disagree with their tactics. I think of the message you're sending out to the children.
Okay. Matthew, thanks so much for your call this morning. More of your calls. Let's talk to Nora, who's in the Wirral. Good morning, Nora.
Good morning. Give me a break. This man, he's not some young virgin bride. It's not even his first marriage. And you're presenting him like this sacrilege. And if he thought that much of his... he chose to be in the public eye. If he thought that much of his lovely bride, why didn't he pay for security? Because obviously he was saving money there. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, Just Stop Oil are not acting for themselves. They're acting for us. For me, for you, everybody. They're not
for
like
everyone's future, is what you're saying.
They're not X Factor contestants trying to get more votes. They're trying to make people aware of what's going on the planet. I wish I had their courage to put their own lives at risk. They're not harming anybody. And it's like, the analogy is, there's a fire and they're throwing water on it and we're standing there going, don't use that water. That's for my swimming pool. It's unbelievable, the public attitude and the way the press, I'm afraid, stand guilty if you want to. Here's them out then. But the press are stirring this up and they're making them look bad, and they shouldn't do. They should be supporting them and putting forward their arguments. I would like to know exactly, the only thing the criticism would be, I'd like to know what their target is, because I feel as if the targets are very broad, and if they had narrow targets, it'd probably just a shame they didn't ask Jim that instead of dancing on the head of a pin about this flipping wedding. Anyway, my wholehearted support to them.
All right, thanks for generous call, Nora. That was Nora there in the Wirral. No, totally respect Nora's view. I'm just kidding. I'm very happy for people to phone in and give me feedback on my interviewing as well. What do you think, though, about the central question here, which is, look, I get that there's an important debate to be had about climate change, and I'm really happy to discuss climate change anytime on my show, and we have done already this morning. But the tactics, are they helpful? Do they actually help the cause of discussing climate change, or do they just make people cross and angry and actually turn against Just Stop Oil? Have they crossed a line by going to someone's wedding to make a political point? Calls and texts on the question of whether Just Stop Oil have crossed a line by interrupting George Osborne's wedding by throwing orange confetti. They actually told me in the past half an hour it wasn't them. Despite tweeting a video of the protest last night, they say it wasn't them. It wasn't one of their protesters. Somebody else was doing it using the famous orange Just Stop Oil colours. Although when I asked the spokesperson from Just Stop Oil whether or not he condoned making that kind of protest, he wouldn't be drawn. So, do you think it's ever okay to get involved in someone's wedding in order to make a political point? Is it ever okay to invade that privacy? Let's talk to Mac, who's in Blackburn. Good morning, Mac.
Good morning.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that these people think they've got a right to disrupt somebody's personal wedding day to make a stance about climate change. I think we've got to remember George Osborne. He was voted in, he was elected by his constituents, and he was voting for policies not because of his own beliefs or because of, what his constituents wanted. So this guy's getting married, and it should be a private affair, and, this is what's wrong with society at the minute. They think they have a right to do whatever they wish, whenever they wish.
Do you think, though, that ultimately, if you're going to make your political point heard, you've got to do some controversial things? I mean, where would the suffragettes have been, for example, if they hadn't interrupted the horse racing on that infamous day? You do have to kind of really push the boat out if you want to break through into the public discourse.
You do, but somebody getting married on their own wedding day. I mean, your previous caller said about hiring security. Should people have to hire security to get married this day and age? It's ridiculous.
All right, Mac, thanks so much for your call this morning. Let's talk to Maria in Hemel Hempstead as well. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks, Maria. I hope you are too. What do you think then about Just Stop Oil not condemning anyway this orange confetti, whether or not it belonged to them?
Now, in my personal view, I think it was wrong. I think that I don't think a wedding is a wedding. It's a private affair. I don't care whether you're good, bad, or the good, the bad, the ugly. No matter what has happened, the reality is everybody deserves to have a private wedding without it being interrupted. But my main point is, and you just hit the nail on the head, is the fact that the nature of protest is meant to disrupt. It's meant to disrupt. It doesn't matter where, when, or how. And if we understand the process of what protests are, sometimes it's had to take rigorous approaches in order to see change. If you think of riots that have happened over the years, I'm not condoning any of this. I'm just saying the nature of what protests are meant to be. They're meant to disrupt. And if we're just going to relegate protests to try and be appropriate in terms of marching up the streets and everything, not saying anything's bad about that. I've been involved in marches and things in the past, but the reality is less people, we're used to that. It doesn't shock us anymore. It's all over social media. We see those kinds of things, but things like this has raised that. Look, we're talking about climate change this morning off the back of that. So that's exactly what they've done. It's achieved the aim that they're looking for, but it's not done appropriately in terms of there should be a line drawn at people's personal affairs. And you've got to understand that the caller, I think, before the guy who spoke, who I agree with, by the way, the guy, I agreed with him, not the caller before, but she mentioned something about, what about the fact that that he was elected for however long he was. But you also have to understand that everybody's talking about the legacy of the Tory party, forgetting about the legacy of the Labour Party prior to that. The reason the Tory party got itself into the pickle it has, apart from lies and all sorts, is because of the impact of what happened with the Labour Party. We actually had it.
All right, well, Maria,
down, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Thanks, Maria. I know the point you're making there, but we're slightly straying into other topics now. Thanks so much for your call this morning. Thanks so much for all of your calls and texts on this question of whether Just Stop Oil should think twice before condoning the throwing of orange confetti over George Osborne at his wedding during his private moment. They actually say it wasn't them, which is interesting because they were very readily tweeting it, as I say, last night.